going, I'd like to perhaps introduce everybody. First of all, say hi to Vicky Foxcroft, who was the star of the House of Commons today. Managed to get Jacob Rees-Mogg suggesting that you could read out some of the poems, which would be great at some stage. If you could do that, it'd be lovely. Vicky is I'm actually in Peckham at the moment doing this from, so my son's house. So you are our local MP. Vicky is the Shadow Minister for Disabled People, and she's well known in the House of Commons for being one of the hardest working MPs there are. And you do a fantastic job, really, really do, really do. Jay is, and I'm going to bring Jay in first because I think Jay needs to go quite quickly because he needs to fly off to, or get ready to fly off to India. Jay is standing in for Jeff Dodds, and Jeff Dodds is the Chief Operating Officer of Virgin Media. Thanks, Jay, for filling in at the very last minute. I really want to take this opportunity. We are recording this, by the way, so tomorrow I can send you a link for it all for you to share or do whatever you want with it. But I want to put on record, Jay, our thanks to Virgin. You created a prize fund of £7,500, which is fantastic, half of which will go to 15 poets, and the other half will go to their 15 chosen charities. So all the prize funds go out, and it will benefit the poets. Virtually all of them are disabled, and I think they will be most of them are very, very pleased that before Christmas that they can have an extra little bit of funds in their pocket. And the charities have been fantastic. Some of the charities are big charities, like for instance, the lady who in a wheelchair, which was the poem I think that actually got most votes, is her chosen charity was, I think it was the British Heart Foundation, which has got an income of £338 million. So our £250 prize money probably isn't going to make an awful lot of difference, but they love the idea of the actual, and they will use it on their website to generate other funds. So that was the idea of it. But then there was the Popsy charity, which has an income of £24,000, and so they were very, very keen on it. Going to Victoria, top left, Victoria standing in for Angel Sinclair of Models of Diversity, and Victoria started her own clothing brand, Unhidden, and that's basically designed for disabled people in mind. And if I'm right, I think, Victoria, you actually was taken quite ill about 2012, 8 years, and then that kind of sort of put you into the disabled community, and I think that's where it all started from. As I say, Mylene I know Eileen quite well. She came to stay with me about 3 years ago. We held a competition called A World of Unfairness, and our lead judge that day was Professor Stephen Hawking, and very, very fortunately, I managed to be able to persuade him to host the winners' conference. So he went up to Cambridge, went to his study, and Eileen came to stay with me. And I remember just a little backstory there, Eileen, is that I said to my wife, who unfortunately has passed away since then, but I said to my wife, I've invited Eileen Ruhr, Hollywood actress, to come and stay with us. And she said, what? We can't have a Hollywood actress staying with us. We've got a modest home and all the rest of it. And I said, don't worry. She's filming Game of Science or something like that. She won't be able to do it. And of course, 2 days later, she said, I managed to break the schedule. And 4 days after that, she turns up at Gatwick Airport. But we went and saw Professor Stephen Hawking, and that was really quite something. Then moving on to Ruth. Thanks for being here, Ruth.
Hiya.
Ruth is the lead singer of Holy Moly and the Crackers, and they've been holed up, of course, because of the pandemic, and they haven't been able to perform. But I was looking actually for some notes about you, and it was saying that you've launched a solo career. And
that's right, yeah.
Yeah, one of the judges said about your music, songs of this depth and honesty make a difference by undoing any stigma with mental health issues, and in so doing, which I think was great because it was helping people to understand, about the mental health issues, which I know that we all kind of, pandemic and so on. And lastly, Keely Cat Wells. I have a little backstory here as well. When I first got married, and this was in 1970, I had a part-time job. I had a full-time job, and in the evening I had a part-time job. and it was working for Zephyr's Pools, checking pools. It was made to make a little extra money, and I didn't realise it until I met up with Keely Cat Wells. It was her grandfather who actually owned Zephyr's Pools. So
really?
yeah, so that was quite something. Jay, coming over to you, Jay, then basically going to ask all of you, and then we'll wrap it all up. But how did the poems affect you when you read them?
Yeah, so thank you for inviting me, and I'm glad to be presenting Virgin Media and Jeff. So the reason why Jeff reached out to me is I'm disabled myself. So I've been on a wheelchair since I was 1.5 years old. I had polio when I was a kid. So I've never walked. So I think walking is overrated, isn't it? Okay. So that's my outlook to life. And in my job, I'm also responsible for diversity and inclusion at Virgin Media. And that's why Jeff said, you can come and talk. How did the poems affect me? I think it affected me personally, especially the poem which Jeff had kind of chosen. It really kind of resonated some of the things I might have felt while growing up. The fact that, you almost feel that everyone and everything is against you. When you're a wheelchair user, the world is not designed for wheelchair users, isn't it? The world is designed for able-bodied people, and the wheelchair users are supposed to kind of go around and make their life happen. So, reading some of those lines of the winning poem, it almost felt like, oh, this could have been me 20 years ago when, I was slightly more younger and a bit more bitter. But as you kind of grow up and you kind of learn, the world can be managed, and the world can be kind of made to work for you. I felt that yes, it is important to bring that angst out. So that was my first reaction, that I felt myself in those poems. The second thing I felt is I don't know how old the author of that poem was. If I felt the same when I was growing up in India, which has more infrastructural barriers and societal attitudes which are slightly backward, and if this poet, who's probably based in UK or in a Western world which is supposed to be more developed, and in the 2000s, if they are feeling the same, that means it's really not moved forward, isn't it? Yes, there are lots of conversations around equity and equality. Lots of companies, organizations, and third sector keeps focusing on that. But has it really changed? Probably not. And I was thinking, would it get even worse? Because we all know COVID has had a disproportionate impact on disabled people. It's had significant impact on a number of demographics in the society, but it has had a really deep impact on disabled people, even active disabled people like me. I'm an active disabled person who's got a full-time job, etc. But you could see how barriers are being erected in the name of I don't know what, isn't it? So that's my thing. So have we really moved on as a society and made it more equitable? Probably not. That was my second reflection. And my third and last reflection was, how can we change? Isn't it? The poet really talks about how they are strong internally. And I think you mentioned that, isn't it, in your introduction, Chris, that people with, or I think it was Eileen when you were speaking earlier, that people with disabilities come with natural resilience, isn't it? And in spite of having oodles of natural resilience, sometimes we all feel, holy cow, what happened? Okay. So how do you really unlock the potential of the disabled community in society, in the world? Because we all know that 15% of the world population, according to World Bank, has some form of a disability. That's almost like 1.4 billion people. That's India, isn't it? India has got 1.4 billion people. So the population of India has got disability, for example, and we still are considered a silent minority. Okay, so which is a bit shocking. Okay, so it is very, very important that people like all of you have either some connection with disability and or have some influence, that we all kind of stand up and role model that disabled people can be productive members of the society and not just people who are a burden on the society, isn't it? I think those were the three reflections when I read the poem which Jeff had chosen as his favorite one.
Thanks, Jay. Actually, an aside to that, as you're a wheelchair user, one of our judges was Cameron Malik, who's the chief executive of Disability Rights.
Disability Rights, yeah.
He had a bad accident falling off his wheelchair, and he's been in hospital now for 2 months.
Oh, wow.
So that was quite bad. But thanks, Jay. Vicky, can we ask you? I mean, you're the Minister for Shadow Minister for Disabled People. What you thought about the poems, and how do you feel that disabled people are being treated in this country?
I would love to be the Minister for Disabled People and not the Shadow Minister for Disabled People, by the way. No, I find it a real honour to actually have the opportunity to read all of the 126 poems. And when we were asked to kind of try and think of the words to say what we thought and felt about them, I found it really hard to try and find the words, partly because each poem spoke something different to me in different ways. Also because I'm no poet, and the talent that was in all of the poems and the awe that I had for the writers of those poems, you know, they were like emotional, they were raw, they were powerful, they were empowering, you know, they were so talented, they were personal, they were funny, and some of them were extremely clever. But the one thing that I did find is that they were inspiring. Whilst talking about their different challenges, it was never about just giving in. It was about, you know, inspiring for change. And kind of then what it showed me is that as a society, we've got to do better. And that's in politics, in business, in media, in music, in the performing arts, you know, right the way through society. And you know, in some ways that's for all of us to make sure that we do that, but it's also making sure that disabled people's voices are heard. And that's the reason why, you know, for me, it's been a huge honor to be asked to be one of the judges on this, and all of the work that's going into making sure that their voices are heard, I think is absolutely fantastic. You know, and some of the obstacles that people spoke about, be it the benefit system, transport, housing, workplace environments, getting about, but also ensuring other people understand, what it is to be a disabled person, and how we as a society need to make sure that enforcing disabled people's rights isn't just for disabled people to always have that battle on their own, but it should be for all of us together to work. Because as Eileen was saying kind of before, you know, it's about the talent, it's about the things that we should be promoting. It's not about excluding people for society. I guess kind of in a synopsis, there's a long way to go, as Jay was just saying. But I really do think that making sure that the voices of all of those poets are out there, and I certainly will take Jacob Rees-Mogg up on the opportunity to read one in Parliament.
That's great, fantastic, thank you. The idea behind the competition was to use poetry as a powerful weapon to bring forward the travails that disabled people suffer. And the competition is finished now, but if you like, the hard work starts, because we intend to make sure that this gets as much exposure as possible. We're producing an online book of the 15 million poems that we will send to every MP, to media, TV, etc. The BBC have been in touch, and they want to make an hour-long programme about the whole concept behind the, right from the very beginning, the creation of the idea, what the kind of poems that we receive. They want to interview the judges, and they also want to interview the actual poets themselves. So that's tremendous. And also, I might be in touch very shortly. The Daily Express are going to do a major 2-page spread on this. Again, they want to interview new judges, which is great. We're getting the word out. Even if, when Jacob Rees-Mogg said today, could you please read out a few poems, you think to yourself, well, okay, so you read out one, etc., and it becomes a little bit more exposed than it would do normally, which is absolutely great. But we have some pretty big ideas about how we're going to make sure that the world sits up and takes notice of poetry. I personally, for me, when I read it, I shook. I'd never seen such raw emotion before. And I've got to be honest, reading 126 poems and publishing them was not good for mental health. You suddenly realise how much suffering was out there. Keely, can we come to you? Are you in London at the moment, or are you in Los Angeles?
I am in Los Angeles at the moment. Yeah, I'm going to be here for Christmas. Not getting back, unfortunately, but can't complain. It's nice and sunny.
Yeah, Keely is, she was an actress, but she's also an activist. She owns a studio, and she also owns See Talent, which is an agency which provides work for disabled people. What did you think about the poems, Keely, and how would they resonate, do you think, to an American audience?
No, I believe in the power of the media and the power of art. It's so incredibly powerful, and I believe to change society, we have to learn to tell and listen to a new set of stories about the world that we want to create. And I think that's what these poems really were. These were people's voices who we haven't heard before, we haven't seen before on a mass scale, on this massive opportunity that film and TV and that is. So I think these poems were showing, how valid and how talented we are as disabled people and as a community, and what an amazing power it is when we all come together to show what we can do. And we have opinions, and all of our opinions are different, and the way that we talk about our stories and our journeys, it's all different. So I think these poems will have a global impact, and it will show that we have voices and they need to be heard.
Good. Thanks, Keely, because we had about 10 poems from Americans, which was good. In fact, one of the winners was for Lime, and she wrote to me today, and I didn't realise how awful Lyme disease is. But she wrote today and said that she couldn't have written over the last 2 weeks because she had a flare-up of Lyme disease, and that was bad. But Ruth, can we ask what you thought about? I mean, you're in the music industry, so therefore you deal with lyrics a lot. So therefore, poetry and prose is part of what you do. How did you feel about that?
I was absolutely overwhelmed with all the poems. Again, I think like what you were saying, I had to take a break after reading some of them because they're so overwhelming and so many of them resonated with me. The sadness, the loss. I became disabled. Well, I became ill when I was 15 and I became a wheelchair user when I was 21. So I was living on my own, and so I had to navigate the benefit system on my own with very little money, and stuff like that. And some of those poems really kind of resonated with that. So I was like, oh God, I'm reliving something that I've kind of had a few years to deal with. But I guess my kind of way of coping with my disabilities and my chronic ill health has always been like a good sense of humour, northern, and very much a resilience that I think I've adopted from becoming ill when I was young. And so my kind of tendency when I was picking the poems, I realised I was picking the ones that were full of good humour and using lots of metaphors. And the thanks but no thanks one, that was my favourite. It's just genius. When people are really trying to help, but they're just not listening. And that's one of my things in the music industry. I tour all the time and I've come across some really hellish experiences. Well, good and bad, but I have come across some really just bad attitudes from people. And some of it is it's a lack of attitude in terms of listening to disabled people. It's able-bodied people deciding what we need or just assuming rather than asking and listening, and that's something that I'm campaigning for at the moment. So I guess that one really spoke to me. Thanks but no thanks. It's just brilliant, that one. But there were so many in there. I found it so hard to decide which ones I was going to pick, but I really like the stories in there. And fishing from my wheelchair, that was another one as well. And the things that, instead of the things that we can't do, it was, some of them were about the things that we are still able to do when we just find ways around it. I think as disabled people, we're so good at adapting. In the music industry, I've had to adapt a lot because it's a very, very inaccessible industry to be in. So I'm very proud of the fact that I'm disabled and a touring musician, and I've had some success with it. I'm very, very proud of that. So it was nice to see it was nice to see some positivity in there as well, but also, yeah, a lot of relatable content in there as well about loss and sadness and pure frustration, I think was a running theme in a lot of these poems. But overall, I'm just so humbled to be part of it. And yeah, I thought, yeah, as you said, I'm a lyricist, and I couldn't write a lot of that. I thought it was absolutely brilliant.
Thank you. Yeah, I read quite a lot of poetry. I read the Romantics. I look at it and think there's absolutely no way whatsoever I could even start to write something like that. I put something down, I look at it and I think it's bland, it doesn't mean much. Yeah, some people have just this way with words. And I've had a couple of books published, sports books actually, but to be honest, I just couldn't write poetry. I really couldn't. Can we go to you, Victoria? You're standing in for Angel, who is the founder of Models of Diversity. You have your own clothing range now, which is being adapted and designed for disabled people. What did you think?
Well, I have to say, firstly, thank you to Angel for trusting me to represent her. And as a brand ambassador for Models of Diversity, their support with everything I'm doing has been incredible. And the work that they're doing in trying to fight for more inclusion in the media, beauty and fashion industries is sort of vital to getting our voices heard. So I did go through her choices of poems, and one of them, I mean, it had me in tears because it resonated with me with my sort of gastrointestinal disabilities. Just the sort of the slow eating away at your freedoms and this, like the sort of daily adaptations that you have to make, and then you have to sort of try and survive in a world that just isn't as kind to us as I think this community is to each other. I mean, what I've really seen this year is in the whole disabled community is that we all speak to each other, we all share our stories with each other, and these poems were just one after the other of power and resilience and that loss and that grief that just, you know, it was breathtaking. I had to take so many breaks and pauses because it was just, I can't have another tidal wave of this raw emotion, and just the sheer power of that many voices all saying very similar things. And as Jay was saying earlier, just sort of really showing that we haven't come that far, really. I mean, the Disability Discrimination Act was only 25 years ago. And I still think probably everybody with a disability now has had some form of discrimination and been forced out of work. So we haven't really come that far, and there's a lot to do. And a lot of it is just representation. We need to be in the rooms where these decisions are made. We need to be in head office. We need to be in HR. And we also need to not be the point of the story. You know, we don't need to be othered in that way. We need to just be included to normalize it.
Thanks very much. I agree with you. Lastly, to Eileen. Eileen won't mind me telling you that she's a Hollywood actress, but she has her own disabilities, and she's suffered in audition after audition after audition, because in Hollywood you have to be 100% perfect, don't you? Especially as a woman, you know, from a sort of creatively point of view. What did you think, Eileen?
Okay. When I first read the poems, they made me sad. It made me really sad because I have spent my entire life fighting for inclusion on a big scale in TV and film and in media. And after 30 years, we're just barely starting to see the beginnings of all the work we've done. I had to read the poems over and over and over because I literally couldn't narrow it down. There was so many important stories and so many important things told. And I myself am a writer, I'm a producer, I've been an actress for many, many years. Just to give you a little idea of my story, I was paralyzed from the waist down as a child, and from vaccines. For many years, they thought it was polio, Jay, but then many years later, UCLA determined it was one of the other vaccines. It left me with a C1 to C4 spinal cord injury. On my own, I was put in a wheelchair, but it took me a long time, but I figured out how to get to standing and walking again. And even the doctors didn't think that was going to ever be possible. I've been in and out of wheelchairs all my life since, because they keep rebuilding bones and parts. I have a spinal cord injury. I have the same challenges as people with spinal cord injuries in terms of the neurogenic bladder, neuropathy. I walk, differently, not terribly, just differently. And I deal with chronic bone pain and cancer because of all the treatments. So I understand both sides of it. I've gone from walking to wheelchair to walking to wheelchair to walking, and I've seen the difference in how people treat people, which is probably why these stories hit me so hard. After 30 years of working in the industry and getting into the actor's studio quite easily because of my skills and always having my work praised, I'm one of the most working actresses in Hollywood with a disability, and I still do not make a living. To give you an idea of what they're putting us through here, I still am not ever welcome in commercial auditions because I'm a female with what they see as a flaw. I walk with a limp, which can be hidden. It's film and television, but I still am not considered for series regular roles. That's something Keely and I have been talking about. I'm still asked to work for free all the time. I speak all over the world, but because I have a disability, people just expect me to do the work for free and never be paid. And the sacrifices, I share this with you because I want you to know what we're up against, especially as a woman. I've been told many, many times it wouldn't matter if you were a man. Now, why? Who decided women can't have anything different about them or a challenger? You know, I have put out a lot of stuff in the media, in Forbes magazine, at the Emmys, TV Academy website, and in Strive magazine about how these people who've been through the most are most likely our game changers. They are. They've been through more. They know how to adapt, adjust, and overcome. They're creative thinkers. If I had a company that I was running in the world today, I would want people who've been through a lot running those companies because they are creative thinkers and they know how to survive. So for the life of me, forgive all this passion, but for the life of me, I cannot understand why we're still being kept out, because I feel like film and television is the gateway to opening up the minds of the whole world, because all the kids today are learning everything they accept from what they're watching on film and TV. Now, we still have a lot of gatekeepers that are not letting us play. And it's an exhausting battle. Like I said, I've been in it for nearly 30 years. I'm a writer, producer. My writing has won awards. We've won in festivals all over, but the industry still won't even read our scripts. You know, I've got 20 projects that, how are we supposed to get funding if the green light people won't even read the scripts, or they won't let us in the doors, you know? And the big problem with that is that the big agencies still won't allow disability. They will not bring in anyone with a disability unless you were lucky enough to get on Game of Thrones or something. Then they'll come and cherry pick you, but they won't open the door, and especially for women. So I've been speaking up about this for a lot of years. I've worked with Chris for a lot of years on all these things, and I feel like everyone out there needs to know what we're actually up against, because we shouldn't, when we have these kind of skills and all this stuff to bring to the table, we shouldn't have to be fighting for health insurance every year. We shouldn't have to be fighting just to make a living. We shouldn't be living at the poverty level. You know, and we are. And so I think that we need people who are in positions of power to say, yes, open the door. We need people like Vicky speaking to the people in charge, and we need people like Jay speaking to people like Virgin Media, Greenlight people, whoever's in charge of the money, saying, let's fund these projects, let's bring in these people. Keely and I have been talking about it for a couple of years. I'm grateful for her coming into our game here. I think that I'll get in trouble for saying this, but the UK seems to be far ahead of us. You are. I've seen it on your TV shows, and you know, the US is always following your lead. So I'm grateful to all of you for being a part of this and for speaking up. And also, you know, I gotta be perfectly honest with you about one more thing. People are far more cruel to me when I'm limping into a room than when I'm rolling into a room in a chair. And like I said, I was back in a chair a couple of years ago getting rebuilds again, and people were kind because they're opening up to that, but they still can't seem to wrap their head around someone who has a visible, perceptible challenge that they can't easily explain away. You know, like a wheelchair gives them a reference, And then when you have someone with a limp, which is 40 million Americans, they treat you like you're a leper, like you're contagious. And I'm having a hard time figuring out how we get people to understand that women have every much as a right to be alive and thriving with differences. I think we have to shatter this illusion of perfection that is a weight on all women all over the world trying to measure up to what's on film and TV, when that perfection is completely an illusion and it doesn't exist. And I think that our whole world is going to be better and stronger and work better together when women have that weight removed and women can rise up to equal levels of power without any thoughts in their head that they aren't young enough, thin enough, perfect enough, without wrinkles, all that stuff. It's just nonsense that is unfair to women. So I feel like we just have to shatter all of that so that every human being can feel welcome, included, accepted, and considered for their skills, and nothing else being a factor. We need to be everybody given an equal shot. I feel like these stories are just the tipping point. I read all the poems over and over, and I understand and I feel all of them. And I've written plenty of stories and put them out into the world, and would love to see the TV projects go out into the world, because our level of experience with pain, suffering, joy, all of those things are heightened in people who've had extreme life experiences. And so therefore, yes, our writing is going to be that much more exciting, that much more fun, that much more painful. It's going to make people feel. And the whole point of the TV and film world is to make people think and make people feel. And we have that. So if we could get this stuff out into the world and start to help people feel and understand and have empathy for what we're dealing with, then maybe more people will get on board to open more doors. And we do need to reach the people in charge, the decision makers. We've got to reach them. And Chris, I got to thank you for every effort you've made through the years and all the doors you've opened, and getting Virgin on board and BBC and the media outlets to pay attention. And it takes people like you speaking up. And I know how hard you've worked through the years, and I'm so overwhelmingly grateful to you.
Thanks, Eileen. It's very kind of you.